Welcome to the TJ Mauldin Leadership Podcast, where we talk about life, leadership, and the gospel.
All right, today, season 2, which you knew because you've been here since the very beginning. And if not, thankfully, whatever outlet you're on, you can go back and listen to all of these, right? So season 2, episode 14, really simple. It's going to be a short one today, or at least that was what I told the team, and they all laughed at me just about 50 seconds ago. Maintenance matters. I thought about this. This is going to be true, and I always say it, right? We talk about life, leadership, and the gospel, but I always say this. I always talk about your marriage. I talk about your family. I talk about your relationships. I talk about your teams, your job, your church, whatever it is. And this is one of the things that I feel like is undervalued, but infinitely important, right? This is undervalued, but infinitely important. Maintenance. Maintenance matters. And I can't think of a more boring word. You know what I'm saying? Like when you think about a car, you're like, yeah, I'm going to the drag strip. And you're like, I'm going to the maintenance shop. You know what I mean? Like maintenance. Who wants to do maintenance? Maintenance is boring. But I want to tell you the story. This is incredible. So listen up. There was a stealth bomber. If you don't know what a stealth bomber is, the United States military made this bomber that can fly at incredible speeds. It's undetectable by certain satellites. It supersedes almost every other aircraft ever conceived by man. It's a stealth bomber. And they were built in kind of a northern region, a place where there's not a ton of humidity. And so one time they docked or they landed in Guam. So if you say, TJ, where's Guam? Look on a map, go check out Japan, go south, look at Papua New Guinea, go a little north of Papua New Guinea. It's out in the middle of the ocean. And these bombers landed in Guam. Well, Guam at the time, it was humid, it was hot. It was kind of almost like a tropical feel, like just more humid than where they were created and tested at. And so all the sensors, if you can picture with me this stealth bomber, right? All of these sensors start going off, right? Like all these malfunction warnings and all this stuff, and everybody starts freaking out because one stealth bomber is worth $1.4 billion. And that's right, I didn't say million, I said billion, $1.4 billion, all right? And so they're all like, oh my God, we got to figure out what's wrong. So they start pulling this thing apart. And this is what they realized, that in the air sensor, because of the humid atmosphere, it had developed just a little bit of condensation. There were some water droplets on the air sensor. So the mechanics, the technicians, took a cloth, wiped the water droplets. It's just a few little water droplets. Wiped the water droplets off the sensor. Everything ran perfectly fine. Now, this was crew number 1. Maintenance guys number 1. Technician crew number 1. Well, they're all celebrating. They're all happy about life. Like, oh man, yeah, we figured out what was wrong with this $1.4 billion piece of equipment. And then they all punched the clock and went home for the day. Well, shift 2 comes in. Technicians number 2, like technician group number 2, they come in. They don't know about the water droplets. All of a sudden, they're getting ready for some pre-flight stuff. They're sitting in the hangar. One of these stealth bombers that can be largely automated, right? It takes off by itself with 2 pilots in it. It takes off by itself, begins to ascend into the sky, and instantly pitches forward and nose dives into the ground. The pilots barely eject in time, and $1.4 billion explodes at the earth. Because tech crew number 1 did not tell tech crew number 2 on the second bomber that there was a few water droplets that they had to wipe off, that they needed to get rid of. You say, TJ, what in the world does that have to do with me? Sometimes in our lives, we're not the best leader we can be, or the best parent we can be, or the best friend that we can be. We're not stepping up in areas that we could step up in because there's a few water droplets in our lives that we don't know about. Because we haven't done intentional in particular maintenance on our lives. So I had a guy tell me this one time. It was the first year that Tay and I were married. And, oh man, she's going to love me telling this story. Brace yourself. Nobody tell her about this episode. I'm just playing. So the first year of our marriage, I was a jerk. And I was unkind. I was being unkind. And I was being pretty prideful about something. And we just kind of got like, we were 6 months in and we're like at this impasse. And I'm like, we're like, I'm frustrated. She's tender and patient and kind. And I'm just like, I'm puffed up, in my frustrations or whatever, and just really kind of being stupid. And so, in my mind, I'm like, yeah, you know what we need to do? We need to go see a counselor, almost like a threat. And she's like, awesome. I was like, oh no. So the guy that married us, Jay Ridenauer, he's actually a pastor at Sudbury, First Baptist Sudbury. I think it's First Baptist Sudbury in Sudbury, Massachusetts. He married us. And so I was like, well, let's just Skype. Let's Skype Jay. And Jay gets on the screen with us, and we're just like unpacking it, and I'm like all like passionate, emphatic, and I'm just knowing he's gonna be like, oh yeah, man, like you go, dude, like He-Man, woman power, and like do what you're supposed to do, And he looks at me, he was like, hey, dude, could you just stop being stupid? That was his response. He was a friend of mine. He was like, you know what, dude, what are you doing? He looks at me and he like with this look of like, TJ, you are a jerk. Could you stop being stupid? And this is what he does. Over the course of 30 minutes to an hour, he says, hey, TJ, here's some things that you really need to work on. And hey, Taylor, here's a couple things that you can work on. And I think these are some ways that you could better communicate. And I think the outcome will be much better for your marriage if you two would start communicating this way. TJ, stop being an idiot. Tay, thanks for being patient with this guy. But here's some things where y'all could really help each other and work together. Now, she's got her flaws too. I'm not going to paint her to be something she's not. She's got her own flaws. We give grace and we work together and we build each other up. But he said this, and I'm pretty sure he said it, or either I heard it very soon after that. And if not, I'm about to give him, I'm about to give him some credit for a really good statement that transformed my life. Okay. So Jay said it. He said, dude, because I felt this apprehension and I actually had this conversation earlier with one of our interns about counseling, about maintenance. And I said this, Jay was like, you would not buy an expensive car and never check the oil. Because I was feeling this sense of like almost shame of doing maintenance, shame of going to counseling, shame of getting help in this area, shame of checking, I kind of feeling shame for this. And he's like, bro, listen, you would never buy an expensive car and not check the oil. How much more valuable is your life, your friendships, and your marriage? How much more valuable are they than some car? And he was like, pop the dang hood. And so here's some encouragement for me. And we're going to talk about, I'm going to give you 3 reasons why maintenance matters. But like, pop the dang hood. Like, you have a marriage. You have friendships. You have a job. You have mental health, right? Like it might not be the greatest mental health or it might be incredible mental health. But either way, you might not know where you're at, or you might keep running into these impasse or these struggles or these conflicts. And it's not because they're not changeable or redeemable. It might just be that you don't know how to do it because you haven't diagnosed the problem, because you have not popped the hood. Baby, check the oil. Can I just say it that way? Just check the oil. There's no shame in popping the hood and checking the oil. There's no shame in maintenance. And that's really how I wanted to start, because sometimes it's the smallest things that we refuse to maintain that end up blowing up the $1.4 billion piece of equipment, right? It's sometimes a little water droplet. It's sometimes the little bitterness or the little, like that little frustration that blossoms into something that almost seems, irreconcilable. So hear me say this. Here's the encouragement. Pop the hood. Do the maintenance. Check in on yourself and check in on others. Check in on your relationships. Because you're not too busy. Let me say it this way. You're not too busy. You're not too important. And you're not so tough that you don't need to check out where you are and where y'all are. Now, I'm probably talking to somebody specific right now. So, I mean, I don't know who you are, but when I say you're not too important, you're not too tough, you're not so stable that you don't need to check in on you and y'all, man, that applies to your team, that applies to your employees, that applies to, man, everything you can think of, especially the closest relationships in your life, and ultimately your own heart and your own mind. Maintenance matters because you only get one heart, you only get one mind. And when I say heart, obviously the thing that pumps in your chest, so take care of your physical bodies as well, do some maintenance there. But today I really want to talk about doing maintenance on your heart, like the seat of your emotions. So your emotions and your mind. The first thing is this. The first reason, I'll say it this way, the first reason why maintenance is so important, because it makes you aware of the unknown. Sometimes we know there's some things off, so we're afraid to pop the hood because we're like, I don't know what I'm getting into. But if we will just choose to do the maintenance, to pop the hood, it makes us aware of the unknown. It forces us, if you will, to pause. It creates conversation, but it also allows space and opportunity for things to be changed and things to be fixed. I'll never forget this. I have Y'all have seen a golf cart. I have this thing called a bad boy buggy. And they were so great that they were discontinued like the year after I bought it, right? So, and it's not because they were great. And so, man, this thing is broken down like 550 times. Like, I've replaced the batteries. I've had to replace wires. But check this out. Batteries on a golf cart are, to replace them, the batteries that I needed on my cart was $2,000, all right? It won't crank. And when I say crank, like, it won't turn on. There's not any light. There's all these things. And so, like, I'm so discouraged. I'm calling, getting prices like, oh my God, like, I gotta, like, if I'm gonna use this thing, I'm gonna have to replace these batteries, and this is a huge cost. And check this out. What I did, I said, you know what? Before I take this up there to get the batteries changed, let me just crawl up under this thing. And I've said in previous episodes, I am not a handyman, and like, I'm not good at maintenance, all right? I'm not good at this in many areas, but especially mechanical stuff. But y'all, I looked, and there was this one wire that was like hanging, and there was like a receiver hanging beside it, and I was like, oh, cool. So I take the wires, I put them back together, and the cart runs totally fine, all right? And I'm like, I thought that this was going to cost me $2,000. I thought that I was going to be out of my cart for a while. And during hunting season, if you know anything about me, this is a must-have. And so, like, I have all these assumptions, and I'm spiraling of what this could be and what this could cost and how this is going to dampen, my experience in the woods and what might have to happen, when just a little bit of maintenance, just popping the hood, allowed me to see. It made me aware of the unknown. It was just one little wire that had to be fixed. And sometimes in our lives, we are thinking the worst, but if we'll pause and focus, it gives us space to figure those things out. Now listen, it also allows you to create a process. I was not even going to share the story, but I'm here, so we're going. It allows you to begin a process of elimination. And this is a true story. I'm not podcasting you guys with some fake story. So that happened I bought this cart in 2017. And that happened within the first year. Boom, everything fixed. We're rolling. 2 weeks ago, Cam and I roll up into the yard. I turn the cart off. We go inside, come back outside, turn the cart on. The light shows up. It's green. Everything's good. Push the gas pedal down. Nothing happens. You know what I do? Been here before. You know what I'm saying? It's just a wire, man. All I got to do is get under there and put these two wires together. Well, over the course of time, the black electrical tape that I had wrapped around all these wires and used before, I'd forgotten this part, used before to reconnect these things, it had over time just kind of decayed and it was no longer there. So I grabbed this little metal piece on the right side and this little metal piece, which is now exposed. It used to have a case around it. It's now exposed. I grabbed this little metal piece and I put them together. And when I tell you, I have a bruise on my hand, because it electrocuted me so bad that I ripped my hands away. And as I'm ripping my hands away, I'm like, bang my hand on the frame of this car. And I'm like, all of a sudden, like, who I was before Christ is all of a sudden there again. And I'm like throwing stuff and freaking out. Y'all, I electrocuted myself. But check this out. After I calmed down, went and found my tools I'd chunked, repented, I go to the cart with full confidence. Check this out. Man, I love how God does it. He gives us these little stories, even if it's not great. But I get back to the cart. I put the key in it. Or no, the key was already in. I think when I press the gas that, oh man, it's going to go because I just remedied the situation. I've been here before, right? Like I'm going to hook these wires back together. I hook the wires back together, turn the key, turn it off, turn it back on. There's supposed to be this little click that happens. I push the gas and nothing happens. And so you say, TJ, what in the world are you talking about? Well, when we do maintenance, when we fix something in our lives, if something breaks down again, and we've done due diligence before, we've gone through the maintenance, we have a set of tools and experiences, and we're aware sometimes of the problem. So then a process of elimination started, like, oh, okay, so this thing that used to be broken, now that it's fixed, something else has come to the surface that needs to be fixed. Something else needs to be dealt with. So I called this dude in Tifton. His name's Tadpole. I don't know his real name. And somebody sent me his number, and apparently he's super famous around this area for fixing like everything. He can fix a tractor. He can fix a car. Apparently he can fix an electric cart. And so I loaded this thing up, took it to his house, and it's sitting with him right now. You say, TJ, why do you tell us that story? Had I not popped the hood, so to speak, the first time, I would not have had the experience in my tool belt to know what could be broken and what needed to be fixed. Now, what did I do? You say, why are you telling us this? Because when I realized that it was beyond my ability to fix myself, I brought someone else into the conversation that had more experience with broken things than I have. You say, TJ, why is it important to pop the hood? Why is it important to get counseling? Why is it important to bring other people into the conversation when something in your life seems bigger than you? Because they may have a tool in their tool belt from years of experience or life experience that you don't have yet. Maybe they've been shocked. Listen, I promise you, if somebody calls me like, hey, TJ, man, my electric cart's not working, the first thing I'm going to say is that what you don't do is grab this blue wire and this red wire and you hold the metal and put them together. Like most people be like, well, yeah, I wouldn't do that anyways. That's stupid. I'm just telling you, don't do it. Why? Because I have experience. I have a tool in my tool belt to help someone. But if you never pop the hood, you'll never make those unknown scary things known to you, and you'll never begin to be able to deal with them and to remedy things that are broken. Maintenance matters for that reason, right? So we can begin to diagnose the things that are wrong in our lives and the things that are right. That's what's awesome. When I fixed it this past time, still unfixed, but when I fixed it, I knew, okay, this is no longer the problem. So as we do maintenance on ourselves, we can see over time as we continue to pop the hood, like we can see, oh my gosh, I have grown in this area. I'm better at communicating. I'm more patient and more tender and more loving. And hear me say this, my wife and I have this conversation about Jay often. We go back to talking about that conversation because I look back on who I was 12 years ago as a husband, and I wasn't very much of one, okay? And so what maintenance does now is she and I, as we get to have these conversations and as we're starting to parent our children and endeavoring to love one another better, we can look back on these seasons where we've done maintenance together and say, hey, you know what? Gosh, man, TJ used to be, you have not very much grace and you're super judgmental and you're unkind and man, you have grown in these areas, you're patient, you're whatever. Like you can diagnose the problem, but you can also celebrate in the things that God and you together with your spouse or your friends or your teams or whatever have fixed. So yeah, there's two sides to this coin. In the same way that you pop the hood to check the oil to make sure something's not broken, at the same time, you can go to these old car shows where like literally you walk around the parking lot and all of the hoods are popped because everybody's proud of what's under them. Right? So, but if you never take the chance to do maintenance, if you never take the chance to become aware of the unknowns, create those conversations, allow for that space, you might not realize how many cool things are happening and what God is actually doing in your life, in the life of the people you care about. So number one, it makes you aware of the unknown. It forces you to pause. It creates the conversation. It allows for you to have good, genuine space to start fixing things. The second thing, it opens the door for minor adjustments at a minimal cost. That's what I mean. If we go back to the stealth bomber story, if they had done the maintenance that the first crew had done, they could have made a minor adjustment. Literally, a 10-cent rag from the Dollar General would have fixed the problem on a $1.4 billion spacecraft. That sounds really big, but a spacecraft, right? Like, when you do maintenance, when you pop the hood on your life, on your mind, on your heart, on your relationship, it opens the door. When you do it willingly, because this is what happens, and this is true. It's just like I told you about my marriage. Like we had gotten to a point to where we were like, we didn't know what to say to each other anymore. We didn't know how to fix the problem. We had let this situation escalate to the point to where we were like, something's got to happen. But then I think like, man, what if in our lives we took the initiative on our own to do the maintenance? Like to seek good marriage counseling, to seek a good counselor, a good friend. And I'm not saying that it all has to be clinical psychologists or biblical counseling, but like, I want to have this conversation with a friend about an area in my life that I want to talk about before it gets to a place where it needs to be fixed or has to be fixed. When we do maintenance ourselves, when we choose to put ourselves in a position or put ourselves in a position where we can evaluate our hearts and our minds and commit to doing the work necessary to make sure that we are healthy, loving God and loving people and caring for those around us, it opens the door for minor adjustments at a minimal cost. Genuinely, minor adjustments at a minimal cost. Now, because the maintenance was not done on that stealth bomber, because those guys didn't walk in with that 10-cent Dollar General rag, right? And you say, TJ, why do you say Dollar General? Because guys, Dollar General, they had one in Guam. I guarantee you, right? Like I guarantee right now you could go to Brazil, you go somewhere like in the middle of the Amazon, you'd be like on the Nile River and like you got people still like blow darting their food for supper and there's a Dollar General somewhere. I'm going to pull up in Dollar General, big old yellow sign's going to be there, right? Sorry, I'm going to chase that rabbit. But it opens the door. Like committing to maintenance opens the door for minor adjustments at a minimal cost. That 10-cent Dollar General rag and literally 5 seconds of wiping the water droplets off the air processor or the air sensor. Maybe in our lives, before we explode, before we crash, right, or whatever it is, before the marriage gets to the point where it's so stressed and so tense, maybe we take the initiative to step out, right? Maybe before our teams, before our organization, before we get lost in this world, right? As a church, it's something we're always thinking about here. Like where are we going in 2 years? Where are we going in 5 years? Where are we going in 10 years? Like, what do we feel like the Lord is saying to us? And this year, just personally, Habakkuk 2:2 has become for me my verse. We're having our staff retreat at the end of July. And this is a verse that is one of the theme verses for my heart, for my own life, but also for our staff. It says, Habakkuk 2:2, write the vision and make it plain, so he who hears it may hear it and run with it, so that the hearer may herald it. And so it's like, man, as a team, we're getting together and we're going to begin to communicate and we're going to begin to talk about things that we can adjust so that we're not off track 2 years from now or 5 years from now or 10 years from now. These minor adjustments, where are areas in your organization, in your relationships, in your friendships? You can make minor adjustments at a minimal cost. And I'm not telling you today that there are things that are broken. I'm just saying minor adjustments in the good things to make them better, in the better things to make them the best things, right? So maintenance makes you aware of the unknown. It opens the door for minor adjustments at a minimal cost. And here's my favorite thing about it. It cultivates longevity. If you decide not to change your oil for 10 years, it's going to be a bad day, right? Like something is going to break down. But I know people. I have a friend of mine, his name's Gene Cox. And man, he changes his oil. It's like, he's probably going to listen to this and be like, TJ, I can't believe you're saying this about me, but this is a true story. Gene will be like, they prescribed 4,000 miles, but I went ahead and I changed my oil at 3,000 just because I get that little extra, bit of oomph into the engine. And I mean, like he is so particular at maintenance in his life and with his automobiles and with his things. And it's incredible. You know what that does? The things in his life last longer, right? The things in his life are better taken care of. So think about this. If you're willing to do in your life One, pop the hood, make the unknown known, and then do the minor adjustments at a minimum cost. The things that you care about, you will get to keep them longer. If you commit to maintenance, you'll get to keep them longer. If you commit to maintenance in your organization will be effective longer. If you commit to maintenance in your leadership, you will be respected and valued longer because you will make the adjustments in your life and in your organization necessary to cultivate longevity. If you do intentional maintenance in your marriage and with your friendships, you will cultivate longevity. And that's my favorite thing about maintenance. That's my favorite thing about it. Like, it is not always enjoyable. It's oftentimes an inconvenience. Like, tell me when it's a perfect time to get your oil changed. You know what I'm saying? Like, no. That's why they created a 10-minute oil change place, because they know everybody's like, oh my God, I got to go do this, right? But that is what creates longevity. Doing the intentional maintenance as you go creates and cultivates longevity. So hear me say it like this. Do the maintenance in your spiritual life that you need to do. Get into the Word of God. Man, get to know God in prayer. Dive into a small group, whatever that looks like. Do some maintenance take some spiritual inventory today so that you can cultivate longevity between you and God and your effectiveness as a believer. As a parent, as a spouse, as a leader, as a friend, whatever it is, begin to do some maintenance and evaluate your heart, evaluate where you are so you can cultivate longevity. And man, listen, hit up the Dollar General, buy that 10-cent rag, do what needs to be done. I said it earlier, and I'll say it again. You are not too busy. You're not too important. You're not so stable and so tough that you don't need to just pop the hood. I promise you, I've yet to meet someone that did the work of maintenance in their life and regretted it. I've never met a person that at the end of the day, they might not have enjoyed it, but at the end of the day, the maintenance mattered to them because it allowed them to cultivate longevity. It made the unknown known and less scary, and it opened the door for them to do minor adjustments at a minimal cost. Listen, today I hope you will be intentional about doing some maintenance in your life. And I'll say it like this as we wrap up. What I'm going to do is in the show notes today, I'm gonna put a few resources, some spiritual resources to where if you want to grow in your faith, if you want to do some spiritual inventory, I'll post a book for you. If you want to do some heart inventory, I'll put a couple trusted counseling resources in the show notes as well. And you know, if you have an electric cart, I can put the manual for a tooth. I'm just playing. I'm not going to listen. Do the maintenance. Do the hard work of maintenance. Know that you're loved. God loves you. We love you here at the TJ Mauldin Leadership Podcast. Like this, subscribe, share. It would mean a great deal to me and the team if you would do that. And email us. Let us know how you feel, what you're thinking. Maybe there's some points that we hit that you're like, oh, could you unpack that a little more? We appreciate the emails that we've received, and it's caused us at times to think through like, oh, we need to address this, or this would be a good podcast. This would be a good topic to cover that people are really thinking. So know that we're thinking about you, that we do this for the glory of God first, but for you, so that we're all sharpened and shaped for His glory and for the good of the world together. We love you guys. See you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the TJ Mauldin Leadership Podcast, where we talk about life, leadership, and the gospel. If you enjoyed this episode, share with a friend. For more content, follow us on Instagram and YouTube. If you have any questions you would like to ask TJ, whether it is about life, leadership, or the gospel, you can email those to tjmauldinleadershippodcast@gmail.com. Thank you again for listening, and we hope you join us again on the TJ Mauldin Leadership Podcast.